All right, well, it's great to see everybody here today, and thank you so much, Peter. That was an excellent presentation. I've seen a number of presentations on design. I've had the opportunity to do a little design myself, and I can't emphasize enough some of the basic things that you said in terms of design, that people make mistakes all the time, because I review many of the things people in this room have probably built. But also, he said some things that I think really go to the nuance of what makes voice different and can make it a really compelling experience. I was asked by Smartly to come today really to talk about the industry broadly and what it means for brands in particular. And so we're going to talk about a couple things. If anybody who knows Voicebot.ai, we'll talk a little bit about data because we think that's really interesting. And I'm going to lay out a framework here of things that brands can do, and I think this is useful for developers who work with brands as well, to think about what they're trying to accomplish. And that's one of the big mistakes that I think a lot of organizations make, is they try to accomplish too much, and they fail on trying to accomplish something really well. So we'll do that at the end. Okay, so just a quick thing about Voicebot. How many people in here have come across Voicebot.ai? All right, not nearly enough of you, because every hand should go up. So you can go in with the Wi-Fi right now, Voicebot.ai. We write about voice and AI technology every day, pretty much. About 60 times a month we publish. We do research and analysis. And just one more thing, how many people have heard the Voicebot podcast? Again, not nearly enough. Okay, so go into Apple Podcasts or Google Play and do that. And I will tell you that Hisham has been on there. Jess Williams is here today. She's been on there. I think Dan Whaley is here. There's Dan right there. So there's at least 5 or 6 people in this room who have been on the Voicebot podcast. So you might hear them talk today, but you'll get an hour in depth on that. And so I definitely recommend it. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is we're here today because something different has happened, okay? I don't know how familiar people are with U.S. media, but this is Jimmy Fallon with The Tonight Show, and he has, and I'll get out of the way so people can see this, he has an Amazon Echo Show on his desk, okay? Now, this was in the last couple of months, and so we think of these devices as being fairly new, and yet they can actually put these in media, and the audience recognizes what it is. They can quickly get there. Now, does anybody recognize, how many people recognize this? A lot more of you recognize South Park than Voicebot.ai. I'm very offended. I just want to let you know. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, it's kind of irreverent comedy. Most of you will know. The first episode of the season this year, about half of the storyline was around smart speakers, both Google Home and Amazon Echo. And again, it landed from a comedy standpoint because people already had some context. And so a lot of people have smart speakers. But it's really just the beginning. I just got back from CES. Anybody here went to CES this year in Las Vegas? Yeah, just a few people. More people read Voicebot.ai than went to CES in this room. I just want to let you know. So every device there, and the people whose hands went up can say this, almost every electronic device has voice now. Right, so you just think about this. Last year at IFA, which is the CES for Europe, pretty much every wireless speaker that was on display had a voice assistant. 6 months earlier, that was not true at CES last year. So it came to be this point where everyone felt that it was a must-have capability. This year at CES, it seemed like every type of appliance, anything that you could plug in, wanted to have a voice assistant because they wanted to be viewed as relevant. And that's the key thing. They were worried that they wouldn't be viewed as relevant if they didn't have voice engaged. And it's not just the appliances and the things that are around us, but it's the things we have with us that are so important. And we're really taking, it's interesting, we talk about voice being this personal thing on our desktop and then on our phones, and we used it a little bit. And then we put it on a smart speaker and we use it all the time, right? And so now that's actually getting people more accustomed to using voice on the things we have with us all the time. And I think that's one of the really important things, because what we're seeing is microphones will soon be everywhere. And there's an implication for brands and people who want to reach consumers about this. So for those of us who build applications, it makes a big difference, right? Because we want to build a utility and we want to voice enable that utility. But for a brand that could be in media, it could be a consumer product, it could be a retailer, they want to be able to connect with consumers wherever it is most convenient for that consumer at the time the consumer expresses interest or intent. So that's a long phrase there, but that's exactly what marketers, brands, media want to do. And microphones now create this opportunity for this ease of access that we haven't seen before. So voice and audio access to everything is going to be important. Brands need to fundamentally think about rethink their omni-channel strategy, how they're going to connect with consumers. So why is this happening? Well, the first thing I'll just say is that voice is faster, right? So I think we all know that. We can speak 150 words per minute. Typing is not that fast. Some of you maybe can do 60, 70. There's some developers I know could probably do 90, but I can't actually read what they type, so it doesn't matter. My daughter can definitely do more than 24 words per minute on text, but again, we're talking a fifth or a sixth is fast. Voice is also more convenient in many use cases. You think about hands-free, eyes-free. That's how I got engaged in this. I was doing voice on mobile starting around 2013. We were looking at the hands-free, eyes-free use cases. And I've got some data here from Google which talks about this idea of now is one of the reasons why this is happening now is because speech recognition has gotten so much better. And we talk about this idea that a lot of people don't know this, but humans generally on average miss about 5% of words. And so the quality of our interpretation, what people say, we have some fall off. And Google talks about how they've reached that level of human level accuracy. Now that's not all that's involved in conversation. There's more than just getting the words right in order to interpret the conversation, but it just shows that we've gotten beyond the good enough stage. And that's why this is happening now. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening today. I'm going to move pretty quickly through this. You'll see a lot of data that's very US oriented because US was a large market, obviously, but it was one of the first to really start adopting this. But we see this data here from Capgemini, which was France, UK, Germany, US. They said over half of consumers have used a voice assistant at some point. And what are they using it for? Well, in many cases, they're saying 1 in 4 have used it to replace something that they would normally do on mobile. So you think about tasks that you would do on mobile every day, and about 40% are expected to within 3 years. And we're even seeing it to replace physical store visits. So you might go to a store to find out more information about a product, but now people are using voice to do that as well, or they're buying it instead of going to the store. And we get back to these ideas of convenience, and it allows people to multitask. So I can, instead of going to the store, I can ask for information and I can place the order, and it saves me a lot of time. And I can do that while I'm washing the dishes, for example. Okay, so if we look at the US, where we've had the most experience in this to date, it's an interesting barometer, and we can start to think about how that might impact global adoption. So CIRP, one of the analysts that focus on this, says there's now 45 million smart speakers in the US, and we see the breakout of market share today. And I think when we think about that, there's a few things I take away from these numbers. First of all, this is not 2015 on the left. That's June of last year. So we're talking about a 6-month growth rate from just about 20 million to 45 million. If you go 2 years before, it's about 2 million in the smart speaker space. The other thing is, I look at this pie chart, kudos go out to Amazon and Google. I think for Google, as Lionel talked about, 14 months ago didn't have a product in the market, and now it's about 25% of the market in the US. Very impressive, some of the things they've done over the last year. And you look at it, Amazon being able to maintain that market share despite what we see are dozens of competitors that come into the market, both very impressive things. But what we really see here is that consumers care about this space. And about 16% of Americans today, that's double what we had last year, own a smart speaker. It's about 40 million people. When you think about it from a brand or marketing standpoint, we're starting to get to critical mass, that this looks like a mass market consumer reach channel. And you can easily see this doubling this year. And by the way, if you include children under the age of 18, the number's over 50 million in reach. The other thing is smart speakers were the #1 device, most popular device for sale during the holiday season this year. And I look at the second number, which is most interesting. We just saw that number, 16%. 4% of Americans got their first smart speaker in the fourth quarter. That means in the fourth quarter, access to smart speakers and voice assistants grew by 25%. So that's over a 2-month period. Something is happening here. Okay, so I actually have some new data too around UK, Germany, and France, and no one actually has seen this data. It's a friend of mine who's an analyst at Strategy Analytics, David Watkins, was kind enough to share this. The caveat is he's still working on his final numbers. So he'll report those in a couple weeks. They might be slightly different than this, but this is pretty close to where he thinks it's going to land. So about 500,000 in France, and Germany, we're at 2 million. In the UK, we're at 3.8 million. By the way, in the UK, he estimates about 9% of households have access today. And we're talking about really just about a year that these have been out. There was some limited release of the devices in the fall of 16, but mostly just about a year. They've gotten up to about 9% household penetration. Pretty extraordinary, actually, in terms of reach. The other thing we're seeing is that the hearables, we talked about all the smart speakers have to have voice assistants. Now we're seeing earbuds have to have it. It's a must-have capability. I mean, it's really kind of extraordinary that a couple years ago we didn't even have this concept available, and now we've got 2/3 of all of the earbuds that are being shipped have access. And a number that we've seen, you talk about 400 million on Google Assistant, 375 million on Siri. We're talking about large numbers. And one of the things that we've seen is that although voice assistant usage on mobile has historically been fairly low, and you can look at that number, about 0.33 uses per day, what we're seeing is actually the smart speaker usage is increasing usage on the mobile devices. So people become accustomed to using voice at home, and then they just naturally think that, oh, I'll use voice when I'm out and about because it becomes a habit. And the last thing is, I don't have a slide on this, but we do have it on Voicebot.ai, which you guys can all go to and read every day. There's an analysis that shows that smart speakers are actually the fastest growing consumer technology in terms of reaching 50% of population in the US. So about twice as fast as mobile in terms of penetration. Okay, so what are some brands doing? Well, and this is where we're gonna wrap up. We're gonna talk about 7 things brands can do with voice. The first we want to talk about is generate awareness. So think about what the job to be done is, as Peter talked about. So what is my core objective if I'm a brand here? And let me ask, how many people in here are either work with brands or are a brand or media company? Oh, okay, so maybe 2/3. Okay, great. So are they focused on generating awareness? If you look at like Progressive, for example, which is a large insurer in the US, you cannot contact an insurance representative. You can't even find out about their products. You can't get pricing, but they have a wealth of information. This is a Google Assistant app on insurance. It educates consumers and keeps them thinking about Progressive, right? So they're just generating interests around Progressive. We look at something like Jeopardy or Rise Bar, which they're thinking about, just trying to make sure that people are aware of it. Okay, create engagement. So, again, this is the idea that a lot of marketers will be familiar with, in that we not only want people to know about us, but we want to have some sort of interaction so they develop some affinity around what we're doing. And I like the idea of Blinkist. How many people are familiar with Blinkist? Okay, so quite a few on this side of the room. You guys have some work to do over here. So Blinkist, they do short summaries of books. A lot of it's business oriented, but they have other things as well. And because they have basically a 15-minute summary of an audio book that might be 4 or 5 or 10 hours or something like that, you would think it's short enough. But what they did is they did something even different when they launched this on the Alexa platform last year, is they have 1-minute clips, which are just sort of key swing thoughts from some of these things. And that drives this back and forth engagement. You can listen to multiple times. And that's, again, is different from some things that, for example, E.J. Gallo has done with the Apothic wine brand, which is, and this is a Google Assistant app, where it'll actually walk you through a guided wine tasting. And one of their objectives was to get people to have some back and forth with the brand, but also to buy more bottles of wine, because you don't do a wine tasting with 1 bottle of wine. You buy 3 Apothic wines, right? So, you think about that engagement and how that fits their objectives. Facilitate transactions. How many people here have bought something using a voice assistant? Again, this side of the room is far more advanced. We need to do some work over here. No, really, it's a really interesting experience. There's a lot of learning that's going on in this space right now, but clearly there's a play here, and I know that Amazon has really done tremendously well, from what I understand. The data that I've seen, which is not from Amazon but from independent survey data, shows that there's been about a 10% uplift in purchases for people who actually buy the voice-enabled devices. And then you look at Domino's, talks about in the US and during their earnings call how voice is actually one of their key channels, along with mobile, for driving increased growth. The other thing we think about is, like, media companies in particular, or companies that have a lot of content, is around this concept of distribution. So Scripps, is affiliated with Discovery Networks, and they've got radio and television, things like that, Wall Street Journal, Audible. It's all about using this channel, because it's this robust, rich audio channel, to get your data to more people more conveniently. So that's another thing that you can do. And then you've got the organizations that are building voice into their products. We talk about Ford in the US is really the most advanced here, although the other big thing you saw at CES was that every car brand has a strategy around this. And most of them had some sort of voice for a long time. I spent some time with Nuance. They have this embedded voice capability that's really quite robust, and a lot of organizations have that. But now they want to bring things outside the car into the car, and that's where Alexa going into Toyota and Google Assistant coming into, I think it's a couple hundred car brands through Android Auto is going to be so big. And then you have other brands like light bulbs, interestingly enough. I mean, pretty amazing. There's, GE now has a light that's got a speaker and a microphone in it, so you don't even need to have a smart speaker, but you can still get access. So these are value-added features that voice can provide to an existing product, which might not seem like it would have a logical voice component. Improve operations. This is coming soon. There's a lot of businesses out there that think about how they can become more efficient. And I'm not talking about customer service here. This is like internal operations. But this is something that voice will be used. I've spent a lot of time in supply chain early in my career. And we had these things called voice pick in warehouses. So there's a lot of operational things where voice can be more effective. And then we have companies that are looking to service their customers better. So we have banks and insurance companies that are using it from a customer service standpoint. So there's 3 things I'll do. Peter took my second point, so you can just look at the first and third, which he didn't talk about. First and foremost, as a brand, you really need to have presence. And I can't emphasize this enough. If a consumer asks about your brand or about your product category and you do not have something voice-enabled, you are absent. You are literally silent. Just think about that. You're missing this opportunity at this time when your customer is primed. It's as if the Google search box didn't exist, right? And you couldn't actually find this information about your brand. And the big problem is your competitor is increasingly there. So if you're not, you're going to miss out on that conversation, and your competitor is going to have it all to themselves. The idea of persona is to be distinct in your voice and sound, and that's, you need to think about that in terms of how you want your brand to be portrayed through this voice interface, and then promote it. A lot of organizations are throwing things out there, and they're not trying to get people to interact. You need to promote it once you get out there, because there's a lot of learning that you can have. I had an extensive conversation with some people about this last night, but the types of things that you can learn, the data you get back are going to set you up for long-term success in this space. And so just end with this. My data analysis has identified 3 perfect Valentine's dates. Really good timing for this, this thing. Siri, Cortana, and Alexa. And if Google would adopt a name, she'd probably be up here too. But this is the point for brands. The perfect date for you right now is this. This is the next platform. I've been through this with the web. I've been through this on mobile. It has all the hallmarks of both of those. And over the next 10 years is really going to be the most important channel we all work in. Thank you.